On November the 5th, 1770, in the small Flemish town of Castle in northern France, Dominique Joseph René Vandamme was born into a family that was neither noble nor powerful. His father was a modest merchant, and his upbringing gave little sign that this child would one day stand at the heart of Europe's bloodiest wars. Vandamme was, by all accounts, a headstrong youth. Castle, perched on its hill overlooking Flanders, was a crossroads of cultures and languages. From an early age, he grew restless. The rigid social structure of the Ancien Regime meant advancement for boys like him was limited unless they gambled their fate in the army. In 1786, at the age of just 16, Vandamme enlisted in the French Royal Army. He was shipped off to Martinique in the Caribbean. Life in the tropics was harsh. Disease, punishing heat, and a sense of isolation from Europe's main theatres. But even here, Vandamme's rebellious streak shone through. By 1790, amid the rumblings of revolution in France, he deserted and returned to the mainland. Yet the spirit of revolution was irresistible. The nation was at war, and the Republic called for volunteers. Vandamme re-entered military life in 1791, raising his own volunteer company known as the Chasseurs of Vandamme. By sheer audacity, he was elected captain. One of his comrades later recalled, "He was full of fire, with eyes that could pierce you, and a voice that made men follow even when their reason told them no. We knew he was reckless, but he was ours." Vandamme's natural leadership propelled him upward during the wars of the French Revolution. In the campaign of 1793, amid the bloody fighting in Flanders and along the northern frontier, he distinguished himself. At the Battle of Honscoot in September 1793, French volunteers under General Houchet routed the British and Austrian troops. Vandamme, then a mere lieutenant colonel, threw himself into the thick of the fighting. Reports mention his company storming hedgerows and farmsteads with bayonets fixed, shouting to his men, "No step backward, forward, forward, France is watching us." That same year, he was promoted to General of Brigada, meteoric rise from deserter to general in just 3 years. But Vandamme was not simply a rising star. His temper and habit of looting towns after victories drew scrutiny. He was court-martialed, suspended, and accused of excessive violence toward civilians. Yet, time and again, the Republic needed bold commanders. Vandamme was reinstated, each time more ambitious and more feared by his superiors. Eyewitnesses and later memoirs describe Vandamme in this period as a tall, broad-shouldered man with a dark, intense gaze. His speech was coarse, his manners rough, but his presence electrified soldiers. A young officer who served with him remarked, "Vandamme had none of the polish of the court, nor of the academy. He cursed like the rank and file, he ate with them, and he bled with them. But on the march, his fury drove us faster than hunger or discipline ever could." Between 1794 and 1799, Vandamme fought in a series of engagements in the Low Countries and along the Rhine. At Tourcoing in 1794, his division played a key role in the Republican victory against the combined Austrian, British, and Dutch armies. At Diersheim in 1797, he faced Archduke Charles of Austria. Vandamme's troops stormed enemy positions along the Rhine, forcing the Austrians to retreat. His daring in battle earned him respect, but also reinforced his reputation for recklessness. And at Newport in 1793-1794, Vandamme showed his characteristic mix of courage and brutality. When the French position was threatened by superior forces, he ordered a ferocious counterattack, personally leading from the front. Witnesses describe him standing in musket fire, bellowing orders as if daring the enemy to strike him down. By the turn of the century, Vandamme had carved out a reputation as one of the Republic's fiercest generals. His rise was not smooth-marked by disciplinary issues and clashes with other officers, but his battlefield results were undeniable. The man from Castle had proven himself more than a provincial soldier. He was a force of nature. He combined brilliance in attack with an uncontrollable temper. Both traits would define his entire career, bringing him both glory and disaster in the Napoleonic era to come. Thus ends Vandamme's early life shaped by poverty, rebellion, and the fires of revolution. He had risen from deserter to general, a soldier beloved by his men, but feared by his peers. Ahead lay the battles that would cement his legend: Austerlitz, Culm, and Waterloo. But already, the qualities that made him formidable were clear. Vandamme was a man who could win victories for France but also create enemies, even within his own camp. By the dawn of the 19th century, Dominique Vandamme was no longer the reckless volunteer captain from Castle. He was a hardened general of brigade, tested on the Rhine and in Flanders, and by the time Napoleon seized power in 1799, Vandamme's reputation had spread throughout the army. He was bold, tireless, and utterly merciless toward the enemy. Napoleon himself would later quip, "If I were to wage war against the devil himself, I would want Vandamme at my side." And yet, beneath this compliment, lurked a note of warning. Vandamme was unpredictable, insubordinate, and infamous for his rages. These traits would earn him both triumphs and humiliations across the Napoleonic Wars. In December 1805, Vandamme commanded a division in Marshal Soult's IV Corps during the legendary Battle of Austerlitz, Napoleon's masterpiece. His task was crucial: seize and hold the Pratzen Heights, the very heart of the battlefield. Vandamme's division surged uphill through musket and cannon fire. Russian troops under General Collerat resisted fiercely. Accounts describe Vandamme at the very front, bellowing, "Forward, men! France looks to us! Take the heights, and the victory is ours." Eyewitness Lieutenant Noel of the 4th Line recalled, "We climbed as if possessed. Smoke blinded us, but Vandamme's voice carried through. He seemed to rise taller than any man, daring us to falter. We drove the Russians back step by step, the bayonet doing the work." By 10 a.m., Vandamme and Saint-Hilaire had broken the Allied center. Russian units tried to counterattack, but were thrown back in bloody fighting. French artillery was dragged up the slopes and began blasting the Allied lines from above. With the Pratzen in French hands, the Allied army was splitting too. By afternoon, the left wing was pushed into the frozen lakes of Sachen and Munitz. French artillery fired into the ice, sending men and horses crashing through into the freezing waters. Napoleon rewarded him with the Grand Eagle of the Legion of Honor, telling Soult that Vandamme's fury had decided the day. After Austerlitz, Vandamme was sent east, where his aggressive style was put to use in the Prussian campaign. While other French generals won glory at Jena and Auerstedt, Vandamme conducted a series of sieges across Silesia. He besieged Breslau, Briga, Glogau, and Nice, forcing fortresses to surrender one after another. This was slower, grimmer work than the glamour of Austerlitz, but Vandamme's persistence paid off. His successes were rewarded by Napoleon, who made him Count of Uniburg. Still, even during these victories, his brutality showed. Reports accused him of harsh requisitions and intimidation of local populations. Yet in the Emperor's eyes, results mattered more than methods. During the War of the Fifth Coalition, Vandamme commanded troops from Württemberg. At Eckmühl, his corps fought with stubborn determination on the flanks, contributing to Napoleon's victory over Archduke Charles. At Wagram, Vandamme was wounded in the bloody two-day battle. His resilience in returning to the field despite injury impressed even his critics. One Württemberg officer recalled, "Vandamme was everywhere. Even when struck by shot, he cursed the surgeons, pushed them away, and returned to the lines. His presence alone seemed to will men forward." When Napoleon launched his ill-fated invasion of Russia in 1812, Vandamme was given command of the Westphalian Corps under King Jerome Bonaparte. But here, his temperament caught up with him. He quarreled bitterly with Jerome, openly mocking the emperor's brother as incompetent. Their feud grew so intense that Napoleon, tired of Vandamme's insubordination, removed him from the campaign and ordered him back to Paris. For Vandamme, it was a humiliating exile. While others marched to Moscow and endured the retreat, he sat sidelined gnawing with frustration, convinced he was denied the marshal's baton he deserved. If Russia was Vandamme's frustration, then 1813 would be his greatest test. After Napoleon rebuilt his army following the disaster, Vandamme was given command of the I Corps. At the Battle of Dresden on August 26–27, 1813, Vandamme distinguished himself again, pressing the attack and contributing to Napoleon's victory against the Allied coalition. Napoleon, eager to exploit success, ordered him to pursue the retreating Allies into Bohemia. But what followed was one of the greatest catastrophes of Vandamme's career, the Battle of Culm, fought on August 29, 30th, 1813. Marching aggressively, Vandamme pushed deep into enemy territory. At first, his advance seemed unstoppable, but the Allies turned on him. Russian, Austrian, and Prussian forces encircled his corps in the narrow valley near Culm. Here's an eyewitness account from Russian Admiral Kolzakov. The fields were soon covered with corpses of men and horses around 11 a.m. The forces of Kleist appeared in the French rear. Confusion spread among the French ranks. Soldiers, covered in mud and blood, began fighting through the enemy lines, throwing down their arms in despair. By the end, Vandamme's corps was destroyed. 13,000 Frenchmen were captured, along with most of their artillery. Vandamme himself was taken prisoner by the Russians. In captivity, he remained defiant. When Tsar Alexander accused him of being a plunderer and brigand, Vandamme snapped back, "I am neither a plunderer nor a brigand. My contemporaries and history will not reproach me with having soaped my hands in the fee. Blood of my father." It was a stinging remark aimed directly at Alexander, whose father, Tsar Paul, had been assassinated. Vandamme was marched east as a prisoner, treated harshly by his Russian captors. Released only after Napoleon's first abdication in 1814, he was forbidden to enter Paris by the returning Bourbon monarchy. Instead, he lingered in exile, restless and bitter. But when Napoleon escaped from Elba in 1815, Vandamme seized his chance for redemption. During the 100 Days, Vandamme threw his lot in once more with Napoleon. He was placed in command of the Third Corps under Marshal Grouchy. At Ligny on June 16, 1815, Vandamme fought fiercely, helping Napoleon defeat the Prussians under Blucher. But 2 days later, during the fateful Battle of Waterloo, his frustrations boiled again. As Grouchy pursued the retreating Prussians, Vandamme urged him to march to the sound of Napoleon's guns. Grouchy refused. Napoleon, locked in mortal combat at Waterloo, never received the support he needed. Vandamme's warnings went unheeded, and France was lost. In the retreat that followed, Vandamme commanded the rearguard at ISI, fighting one last desperate action outside Paris. But it was over. Napoleon abdicated once more, and Vandamme was again exiled, this time across the Atlantic to Philadelphia. By 1819, Vandamme was allowed to return to France. He re-entered the army briefly, but his active career was finished. Retired in 1825, he returned to Kassel, where he lived quietly, writing his memoirs and brooding over missed opportunities. The general who had once stormed the Pratzen Heights and cursed Tsars now faded into provincial obscurity until death came for him in 1830. Dominique Vandamme's military career was one of brilliance and disaster. He won glory at Austerlitz, Dresden, and Wagram, but suffered ruin at Culm. His soldiers adored him for his ferocity, yet his peers loathed his arrogance. Time and again, his own temperament cut down the very laurels he sought. And always, hanging over his head, was a single burning resentment. Despite all his victories, Napoleon never made him a Marshal of France. That bitterness would define the next chapter of his life. If Dominique Vandamme was remembered only for his battlefield exploits, he might be ranked among the finest generals of the Napoleonic Wars. But Vandamme was more than a soldier. He was a man of extremes, notorious for his rages, his coarseness, and his relentless bitterness toward the one man who defined his career, Napoleon Bonaparte. From the earliest campaigns, Vandamme's personality was a weapon as sharp as his sword and just as dangerous. He cursed like a common soldier, humiliated subordinates, and never forgave a slight. One officer recalled, "To serve under Vandamme was to feel the lash of his tongue daily. Yet when the bullets flew, there was no one you would rather follow. He was fury incarnate." His temper was legendary in the army. A single insult could provoke hours of ranting. He punched fellow officers, threatened mayors, and once seized the home of a wealthy citizen in occupied Germany, declaring it his own. Only Napoleon's protection saved him from disgrace. Unlike other ambitious generals, Vandamme seemed incapable of playing the political game. He feuded constantly with fellow commanders. He denounced Marshal Soult as timid. He clashed with Jérôme Bonaparte, calling him incompetent to his face during the 1812 campaign. He even defied Davout, the Iron Marshal, though Davout was one of the few who could control him. These quarrels left him isolated. While others advanced to the dignity of Marshal of France, Vandamme remained a corps commander forever, just short of the highest honors. Napoleon admired Vandamme's aggression, but never trusted him. He valued Vandamme as a blunt instrument, brilliant in attack, but dangerous to his own side if left unchecked. One famous quote captured this relationship. Napoleon once sighed, "If I had two Vandammes, the only solution would be to have one hang the other." These words reveal the paradox. Vandamme was indispensable in battle, but intolerable in camp. He was a man Napoleon could never entirely do without, but could never fully reward. Perhaps the greatest wound to Vandamme's pride was that he was never made a Marshal of France. He had risen from humble beginnings, won victories at Austerlitz and Dresden, and commanded entire corps. Yet Napoleon held him back. Historians suggest several reasons. Vandamme's reputation for looting and brutality tarnished his name. His insubordination made him politically dangerous. He lacked the polish of men like Ney or Murat, who could dazzle in court as well as on campaign. For Vandamme, this was unbearable. He saw men of lesser talent elevated above him. His resentment grew until it became the defining bitterness of his life. One fellow general noted, "Every conversation with Vandamme ended in the same way. His fury that he was not a marshal. It consumed him more than any wound of war." Yet for all his arrogance and foul temper, Vandamme was beloved by his men. He lived like them, marched beside them, cursed with them, and led with them. A grenadier of the 24th line remembered, "He was hard on us, yes, but he was harder on himself. He slept on the ground, shared our rations, and when the fighting came, he was first into the smoke. We cursed him, we feared him, and still we would have followed him into hell." This bond with the rank and file made him dangerous. His soldiers adored him even as his superiors despised him. Modern historians often compare Vandamme to figures like George Patton in World War II, brilliant, aggressive, inspiring in combat, yet constantly at war with his own mouth. John Gallagher, his biographer, wrote, "Vandamme was a man who could win battles, but not friends. He was consumed by ambition, convinced of his own brilliance, and forever embittered by the prizes denied him." In the end, Vandamme's greatest enemy was not the Russians, the Austrians, or even the Prussians. His greatest enemy was himself. His temper denied him promotion, his arrogance isolated him from peers, and his resentment toward Napoleon poisoned his later years. Yet in the eyes of his soldiers, he remained the embodiment of ferocity and courage. A man who cursed emperors to their faces, and who never bowed to anyone except, perhaps, to his own unfulfilled ambition.